Support American-made tariff-free clothing with American Giant with American Giant. They aren't affected by tariffs because their clothing products never left the U.S. Get 20% off your first order when you use promo code STAPLE20 at american-giant.com.
Hi, welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner. I'm a critic, consultant, and programmer based in Toronto, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Jules Koostachin, a Cree filmmaker whose feature credits include the documentary Wapake and the drama Broken Angel, which starred Sarah Lise MacArthur as a woman who returns to her community with her daughter after fleeing an abusive marriage. And Jules cast MacArthur as that character's own ancestor in her new film Angela's Shadow, which takes place in the 1930s and stars MacArthur as a pregnant woman who brings her husband home with her to her childhood village to discover she's haunted by more than just memories. After premiering at VIFF last year, Angela's Shadow is now available to watch on Hollywood Suite as of today, Tuesday, September 30th, which is also Canada's National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. You should check it out. Jules picked Adrian Lyne's Flashdance, the 1983 blockbuster about a young woman with a dream that's credited with bringing music video aesthetics to the big screen, though it's just as likely that Lyne and producers Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer designed those show-stopping dance numbers by watching nothing but MTV for a straight month. It worked, and Flashdance became a smash hit, even earning Oscar nominations for cinematography, editing, and 2 for Best Original Song, with Michael Sembello's Maniac losing to Irene Cara's title track. And it made a life-changing impression on Jules, as you're about to hear. This is Someone Else's Movie.
I believe it's like the first film I ever went to see in the theater with my mom. I know it's appropriate. I was very young. When you watch it now, you're like, okay, I don't think a kid should have seen this film. But, all good. It was, for me, just seeing this kind of working class woman, follow her dreams, become a dancer, I don't know. She was like an iron worker, I believe. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I just remember how it made me feel. I wanted to be a dancer afterward. And I thought she was super cool. She had her like trench coat, her boots, and, she was tough. And so for me, that was just phenomenal.
Yeah, she was a welder.
Yes, a welder. There you go.
So you said you were young. How old were you?
When was the film released? I believe, was it 1989?
83.
83. So I was born in 1972. So I was 11, actually. I thought it was much younger, but it was the first film I went to see in a theater. And it was with my mom. So it was a big,
Yeah, I'm a little bit older, but not by much. And my first memory of it was always walking into a video store that was playing it.
Yeah.
In 1984, because it was a quick release. It came out it was everywhere. It was on Much Music and MTV. The video, the individual song. I mean, the genius of the film is that its story and the dance numbers are almost completely separate. Right?
Yeah.
Like they're isolated from each other the same way that Alex's 2 lives are isolated from one another. And it's like it was a pure accident that they decided to make this movie the way they made it. Adrian Lyne famously wanted the individual dance numbers to be swappable, and in fact 2 or 3 of them are not where they're supposed to be in the story, and it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
But it gives you this sense of somebody living a double life way more effectively than I think they originally intended.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think at the time we were, we're First Nations, but we were living in the projects in Ritchie Street in Ottawa. So we were pretty poor, and it's almost like seeing yourself or your life reflected on the screen, which is very impactful for a young person, especially someone like me who was into sports and stuff and wasn't like the feminine girl. So I don't know. It really resonated with me. I think it was just the dancing and the fact that she just followed her dreams and faced her fears. That was her drive, right, to become something other than, her day-to-day life. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a quintessential 80s movie in that its characterizations are very simple. The conflicts are very basic. It does not in any way investigate or interrogate the relationship that Alex has with the man who is her boss and owns the company she works for.
For sure.
And is like 10 years older than she is, at least.
Yeah.
But there's something when the 4K came out a couple of years ago, I revisited it for Shiny Things, and I read my piece on it just before we started talking, and I have the same kind of bemused amazement then that I have now, which is like it's not a bad movie. It was knocked for being MTV Cinema. Obviously, that is true. Like it adopts the language of music video and in fact pushes music videos forward in the same way that even as it's drawing from them by doing this kinetic cutting and aggressive enveloping. I never did see it in a theater, and I can only imagine what that would have felt like because it would have been like nothing else anybody had experienced.
Yeah. And as a little girl too, right? Or a young girl, you're just like, wow, what is happening? What is this story? And again, like think about it now and, there's some inappropriate scenes there for a young person. So I think it was very uncomfortable for my mom, I'm sure, who was sitting beside me, but we never talked about it, right? It was just the 70s or no, 80s, sorry, early 80s. So we didn't really discuss what we were watching on the screen. I don't think any of us did when we were that young, eh? Going to the drive-in and some of the films that we watched with our parents.
God, no, actually, I just recorded an episode coming up for a Halloween episode on Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 1978 version,
I remember that.
which was rated PG and has heads being caved in with a like a hoe in a garden and full frontal nudity. It's got all the stuff that a child. I was 10 when I saw it. I was like, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be. But it's all like it never feels exploitative. It's all organic.
Right.
And I think the sense was that people just assumed audiences, just in general, were able to roll with stuff like that, especially when it's contextual. And the sexuality in Flashdance is like powerfully feminist of all things, like which was not what I expected from a movie made by men about a young woman in an industry that is designed to exploit her, but there's a kind of empowerment there. There's a real understanding, as blind as it is to the relationship, to the weird power dynamic between Michael Nouri and Jennifer Beals. It absolutely understands that Alex is the hero and she is constantly punching up. She has friends who are probably in worse circumstances than she is, but she's always helping. She's always empathetic. She has a cool dog. Like she is sketched immediately as this dynamic, interesting hero. And then everybody else, even like the weird older woman that she takes lessons from, has a full life and a range of interests above and beyond this relationship that they have. It's a weirdly sophisticated script.
It is, definitely. And I think, I always question whether or not, looking back on the film, I haven't watched it in a while. Like you have a lot of details, which is amazing. You wrote something about it. So I get it. You dissected or you unpacked the themes and stuff. Was she objectified? Was it empowering? Because sometimes I'll watch films from the 80s or even early the 70s. And I'm like, wow, okay, why did I like this film? What impacted, what resonated, right? And then you look at like 16 Candles or something and you're like, oh my, okay, there's a lot here. So same kind of thing with Flashdance, right? I think it was just more, when you engage with a story or a film, you always remember how it makes you feel. I was just so inspired. Like I think I danced all the way home with my mom. Like I just like, I'm going to be a dancer and I'm going to be as cool as her and I'm going to get combat boots. Like it was just like this whole thing that informed who I wanted to be as a woman and who I felt I already was. Like as a kid, I don't like using the word tomboy, but, as a kid that, played sports or, wasn't very comfortable kind of wearing dresses and all that kind of stuff. Like I was a kid that just wanted to play football or rugby or whatever, right? And then you see a film like that and you're like, oh yeah, I can do that. She could do it. I could do it, So yeah, there was a lot there for me as a young person seeing her. And also too, back then too, we saw a lot of the blonde blue eyes too, and she wasn't that.
Mm-hmm.
So for me as an Indigenous person and having like Indigenous family members around me, it was like, oh, wow, okay, she doesn't fit that stereotype of the hero, right? So that was really, really important to me, I think, as a young person too.
Yeah. One thing that the film does not deal with in the slightest is that Alex might not be, but Jennifer Beals was of mixed race.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and she passes, right? Like there's no question of where she fits in the other hierarchy of America that is never
Yeah.
dealt with at all. And I watching it again, I couldn't figure out. I kept trying to figure, like, is this colorblind casting? Did they not know? She never really made a big deal out of it professionally, and only it's used here and there in her other work, but it was never, it doesn't feel like something she was 100% comfortable with, certainly not when she was coming up in the early 80s, but it's impossible to miss now.
Yeah, I think
Like,
for me, I saw it as a young person. Do you
mhm.
know what I mean? Like, you're used to seeing a certain kind of aesthetic or look or character on the screen. So for me, I knew she wasn't, you know, I didn't know what, but at the time,
Right.
so I also have a cousin who, I have lighter skin. Her mom is Korean, her dad's Jamaican. You know what I mean? So she had a big afro and I had blonde hair, and then we're with all our Cree relatives. So, you're kind of sensitive to that as a young person if you see it. It's part of your lived experience. So for me, when I saw the character Alex on the screen, I knew she wasn't like, what I was used to seeing on the screen, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And the rewatch I just had, I guess this would have been 2.5 years ago when the 4K came out. The racial aspects of it aren't as important as the class conflict in the story, right? I mean, its bones are this 1930s um, underdog picture, right? It could be sports, it could be ballet. I mean, the whole idea is that she has desires above her station on every level. But then it does deal with that stuff head on. In the I completely missed it when I was a kid. I have to admit the code switching that she does, and that also Michael Nouri does, because he's a roughneck who has lucked into some money in this career and knows it. And the most interesting thing about watching it as an adult now was watching their relationship build, because the two actors kind of let themselves be seen.
Mm,
And there are so few, like all the great love stories, to my mind anyway, romantic comedy or drama, are about people finding a partner who sees them, who respects them, who loves them, who takes them as they are, but also wants to be part of the life that they now have. And that's here. And it's so, like, subtly underplayed. It's not in any, like, there's one conversation they have about where she comes from and where he comes from, and they're still speaking vaguely. But by the end of the movie, they're barely talking. They're just communicating physically. Like, there's
yeah.
looks and there's touching. Like the way she hugs him at the end is joyful in a way that, again, is completely earned. But they both have to fight for that.
Yeah.
And so, this film that was completely dismissed at the time as popcorn has, I think it's because it's a holdover from I don't know that this is true. This might just be my own theory, but it feels like it's a holdover from the 70s, where they were still trying to make, popular cinema that is about something as well. Everybody forgets that Saturday Night Fever has maybe 20 minutes of dancing in it. It's all about this miserable, misogynistic person learning to be slightly less horrible.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's ethnography, and Flashdance isn't that. It's much lighter and slicker and more commercial and entertainment,
Yeah.
but it's about stuff.
Hmm.
And I guess I'm not disappointed in myself for not noticing when I was 15, because when you're a 15-year-old boy, you're looking at the girl dancing. That's
Right.
I
Yeah.
can admit that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I felt like I spent 40 40 years giving it no credit for what it actually tries to accomplish. Also, it's Adrian Lyne, not Tony Scott. For years I thought it was a Tony Scott movie just because it looks like everything else he did.
Yeah. And the cinematography, the tone, the feel, like it gave you access to another world.
Mm-hmm.
And she's great as a performer as well as an actor. Like, her face, everything about her, I think, was just so appealing. Um, Yeah, and I also wonder too if it was such an important film for me because I was with my mom. Do you know what I mean? And we were
Mm-hmm.
very poor, so to go to the movies was very rare. I think, we just never had money, so to to have that kind of quality time with my mom was also, something that I remember and treasure. So there's a lot there, right? Like that's what movies are. It's like you remember who you go with, or you remember the discussions afterwards. It's just a feeling you get. Like that's the power of cinema, right? Like you go to be a part of something.
Oh, absolutely. So
Yeah.
how were the discussions? Like, what did you two talk about afterwards? Do you remember the vibe?
Like, what was happening on the screen that was probably not appropriate for a young person, but we didn't really go there. But I think it was more about dreams and achieving your dreams. What do you want to be when you grow up? Like my mom's a residential school survivor, so she left residential school with a grade 4, right? So I think we weren't talking about, well, you can't dance because you need to be a doctor, this or that. Like those were never our discussions. It was more about, what do you want to do with your life? And how do you achieve those things? I don't know. It was just more kind of maybe superficial in a way, possibly. But I was very excited. I remember, like I said, dancing all the way home. We lived in the projects, like I said, and it was just, I felt like I could do something after watching that film,
Mm. And
big for a young person living kind of in poverty like that and seeing her escape poverty or have a way out.
yeah, were there other films that spoke to you in the same way, or was this like just because of the infrequency of seeing them in a theater?
I think Dark Crystal. Do you remember Dark Crystal when the
Yeah.
little girl, her wings, like they're on a cliff or something, and then she goes, "Whatever boys could do, girls could do better," or whatever. I still remember that, and I don't even know when Dark Crystal came out. When did like that was the 70s? I don't even remember.
Yeah, it was like right around the same time, I think, like 81, 82.
Yeah, I remember seeing that film and it was just that one part where she like all of a sudden you see these wings and she flies on, and I'm like, oh yeah, like anything that had like a female hero, I think that was just, it just helped me kind of reflect on who I was as a young person, I guess, and what I could do. It's hard when I have my PhD now, but I'm the first one in my family to ever achieve that level of education, right? So it's like we don't have those conversations in our house. My mom's first language is Cree, second language is English. She didn't care if you went to school or not. She had a very bad experience, so I don't know, like I was just very aware, I guess, of what people were doing around me. And I didn't want to live in the projects for the rest of my life. And I saw people that were there, their parents were there. I knew they were going to end up living there. I had a neighbor, she had 5 kids, and one of the kids was my best friend, Kimberly. And she was struggling, she had all these kids at home. And I remember seeing her go off in the morning. This is in Ritchie Street. And she had all these books and she was going off and she was going back to school. She became a teacher and she got out of the projects with 5 kids on her own, And when I see her, I always tell her that. I'm like, you're the reason why I went to school, because I saw you do it, And I think with cinema and film, when we see that, things are possible, that, creates change, right?
Oh,
I don't
God,
know.
yeah.
I love movies. I've been watching, I'm a big, yeah. I always watch movies and I call it research, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same. I've always just taken whatever I can get, whatever I needed, came from film, television, books, like art. I didn't have my dad was an accountant, my mom was a teacher. It's not like there weren't role models, but neither of those things was something I could connect to, really. It was just the thing that your parents do when they leave the house and then they come home. And my grandfather owned a movie theater. I never had a chance in a normal life. It was a little tiny place, but
That's cool.
it
Owning
was
here.
it was pretty cool. Yeah, it was just the Orpheum Cinema, Bathurst and Queen. It's the home and craft decor shop now.
That experience of, having a theater in the family kind of thing. It's like it becomes a part of who you are, right?
Oh, absolutely. Jonathan Demme famously said the reason he became a movie critic in college is because the moment you find out there's a way to see films for free, you'll do anything you can to keep doing that.
That's great. I love it. That's awesome.
I have lived that advice my entire life. Hey, it's Norm interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the Odd Streaming Project. Last week, I wrote about the new releases of Superman, Megan 2.0, and Sorry Baby from Warner, Universal, and VVS Films, and the splendid 4K restorations of The Girl Who Leapt Through Time and Tim Burton's Corpse Bride from G-Kids and Warner. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Semcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. The other thing, too, you mentioned the lack of aspirational roles for kids. And I was thinking about the context of like Flashdance arriving in 1983, where all the big studio pictures the year before were for boys. Like they were straight up sci-fi movies. That was the year of 82. It was E.T., I guess, has Drew Barrymore, so it's technically a family film, but it's about a little boy. Then there's Star Trek 2 and the Blade Runner and The Thing and Firefox. Like all the big summer movies the year before were about guy stuff. And this movie very clearly, like it's a Bruckheimer Simpson picture. It's pitched at young men.
Yeah.
But by telling the story about the hot dancer girl, like they actually had to invest in her story, and it becomes a narrative that appeals to women and girls, like almost by accident, I think, because I watched it with that in mind this time through, and it's like, I think you have to give as much credit as I give Beals for her performance, and she's a natural. It's just, she's luminous. It's incredible to watch that performance come out of absolutely nowhere, as far as the studios were concerned. But also, I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce her name, Marine Jahan, the dance double, who is giving an acting performance as much as Beals is. Like the two of them together are who Alex is. And, just for comparison, the following year there's Footloose, and Kevin Bacon's charisma just does not translate to any of the dance doubles.
Right.
It's like Ren is this guy, and then sometimes we watch someone else dance in his clothes.
Yeah.
But this one, like you believe that this person is as physically talented as she is, but also that she's designing these elaborate routines. And I mean, these things are ridiculous. They're the fantasy sequences. I think I have decided anyway that we are seeing the versions of the performance in Alex's head rather than what it really is.
Yeah.
But it works because the movie puts you in there. Like we can believe she'd pull this stuff off. And even if it's not practical or financially feasible that she's doing all this, although it would explain why she's living in this tiny crappy, or this huge crappy cheap loft, and has no money because she's putting it all into her costumes and the production design at the Zanzibar. But she is believing it in a way. They both physically are, both the actor and the dancer, to create a single character, which again is so much more thought that had to be put into pre-production and development than a movie like this you would think would maybe deserve.
Do you think that they spent, I don't know, like what pre-production was like, but I wonder if they actually spent a lot of time together. Like, I don't know what that process was like.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
It would make sense for Beals anyway, just to know the physicality of the person who's playing her.
Right. Yeah.
Or sharing her character.
Right.
But you've made movies where you're sort of dealing with narrative connection and stories and relationships that way over time, right? Like, do you coach actors to resonate? Although I guess in this case, you also have the advantage of casting the same person for a sort of a similar role.
I don't have the funds, sadly, with as big productions do. So for me, I think I rely a lot on those friendships, if that makes sense. So with Elise, I saw Sarah Elise. She had a small role. She had a small role in Monkey Beach. And that's when I saw her. And I was like, who's this woman? Like, I just saw her. Like, she was on there for maybe 2 minutes. And I was just like, okay, that's her. That's who I need to cast. And then I reached out, and then we just had a lot of conversation. And thankfully, she was open to that, because normally I have to pay for people's time, right? But I was like, I have this idea. Like, this is for the first film, Broken Angel. My first ever feature that I made for like $800,000, and we had 12 days to shoot it. So there's no time to develop any kind of relationship or rapport, So what we did strategically for that first film, which is part of the trilogy, Angela's Shadow is Next, but is that I said, who do you feel comfortable with? Tell me other stars or other actors that you've already worked with, so we can get past that point. So we casted Carlos and Brooklyn, and it was great because we hit the ground running. And then for the second film, for Angela's Shadow, I just wanted to, because I know I'm limited in terms of access and finances and everything else and time, I just was very strategic that way, I think. Time management, effective, in terms of like how to make sure that the film works. Reached out to Sarah Lise again, and it makes sense for the trilogy because for Broken Angel, she's fleeing domestic violence, but she's also guided by her ancestors, who is Angela in Angela's Shadow. So there's a connection there through, ancestry. I don't know. I wish I had more time. Like I know every production, like even when they have lots of money, they're like, we never have enough time. We never have enough money. But I'm like, have you ever made a film for 800,000 in 12 days? Have you ever made my second feature, Angela's Shadow, is 13 days,
13?
13 days. And sadly, for me, because I have a background in theater, I went to Concordia University and I loved it. Rehearsal is huge. And I come from that world, right? So when we have to hit the ground running, I see, I know that actors want to have a bit of time to play, and we just didn't have that, sadly. But I think because I had a good rapport and relationship with Sarah Lise, there was a lot of trust. And I think that's a big thing in film. Yeah, it was a great experience. It was just very fast. I feel like if I had more time, then I would have loved to have kind of explored more cinematically with different shots and give them more takes and try different things, But I'm happy with the film. I feel like I did what I could with that time, and it's done quite well. It's won an audience award at VIFF and, people enjoy it. So, because I'm kind of blending genres. The other thing with Angela's Shadow that's funny is because it was summer, we had like long days and it was supposed to be kind of a scary movie. That worked against us too. And we could only shoot in the summer because the strike was happening and everybody was available. Anyway, lots of fun things. And I think that's the importance of, like, I don't know, as a filmmaker, it's nice to have these kind of stories, because you remember all the obstacles and everything that you've overcome to make the film. We make films because we want people to see them, want you to enjoy them. And, but wow, making a film in 12 and 13 days that's a lot, but I'm proud of myself.
Yeah. You know what? It hadn't even occurred to me. The sunlit ghost stuff is so like organic to the narrative that it doesn't feel like a compromise. But you're right. It's not as scary if the sun is out, just psychologically.
It's fine. It's fine. I think too, it works because as Indigenous folks, or as, myself as a Cree person, I grew up hearing about ghosts every day. Like it was part of our everyday anyways. It wasn't something that was scary. So maybe that's, we'll just say that was the intent.
Yeah. Well, I don't mean that it fails to be a ghost story because it's not scary, but it is. Yeah, it's a different relationship. I don't know if you've seen Brett and Hannum's new film, At the Place of Ghosts, but it has a similar like daylit supernature to it. There's something going on all the time, everywhere.
Okay,
it was just a TIFF, and it's making its way around the festival circuit now. I think they're planning to open it next, like sometime in the winter, maybe early next year. But it's really interesting the way that it just sort of rides along with characters in much the same way as Angela's Shadow. It's just coexisting with the both of the worlds that are sort of in conflict. It's not like a sudden aspect ratio change or that there's a big shift in the lighting. It's just happening all the time.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting is Ann Wheeler was my mentor for Broken Angel, and went through a lot of rewrites because my writing mentor was Dennis Foon. He wrote Indian Horse.
Mm-hmm.
So we became really close because I was part of the Whistler Screenwriters Lab. And, just working with him and restructuring the script, and, we got a yes from Telefilm, so it worked. And then I talked to Ann Wheeler quite a bit, and she was talking about the importance of every character, even the spirit in your film, having an arc. She goes, you have to have an arc, regardless if the spirit's just kind of residual or not. We need to know what's happening with that being or that spirit being. Anyway, so I thought that resonated with me as well in terms of storytelling. And I think that came through with Angela's shadow as well, that because in Broken Angel, there is a spirit in there too. I like kind of delving into that world. Um, yeah, I do wish we had maybe filmed in the fall where the days were a bit shorter, to get that gloomy feel, but it was great. Like, I have no regrets. We did what we did with what we had, and we had community support. We had a lot of love. We had mostly Indigenous crew. Um, we had access to Kwantlen. A lot of filmmakers try to access that community because it's right on the water. But my friend is there at the cultural center, and he's like, okay, you can come film here. And I've shot there twice, and I know everybody tries to shoot there and they say no. So just having those community connections, I think, it was great. And then the strike and everything was happening. So we got access to, what's it called now? Is it Sunbelt? Sun.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember the name of it either.
Oh, they gave us access to like the best cameras and lenses, and we had all the crew that we could ever ask for because everybody was sadly on strike. But I was like, they all wanted to support the film and they all came out. So it's like amazing people on crew. Like, it was just fabulous. So it was a great experience.
That's good. Yeah, obviously every film is a community and it's a cliche, but something like this only happens, I think, when everybody is really invested in the work.
Yeah. And Indigenous folks who are really into, promoting Indigenous voices, right? Like, probably 90% of my crew was Indigenous. Like, that was incredible. Like, when anything happened or we were stuck or, time became an issue, Judson would grab, a cauldron, one of the props, and fill it up with smudge and smudge the whole set, and we'd stop, and then we'd get everything done. Like, we actually on day 13 finished right on time. Our last shot, we didn't miss any scenes in 13 days. Like, it was like we were all and you're right. Like, it's like when people want to be there, anything could happen. It's magic, right? When your whole crew wants to be there, when they're happy, and that makes a big difference, So that is also a reason why we got it done.
Yeah. I've also just been revisiting Cold Journey, which is the 1975 National Film Board drama.
Oh.
Made by a documentary filmmaker, Martin DeFalco, who was not himself Indigenous, but it's their version of the NFB's version of the Cheney Wenjack story,
right.
With Johnny Yesno's in there as one of the cast members, and Willie Dunn, who yeah, he wrote the songs and was sort of an advisor on it. He appears in the film very briefly. And it's just been reissued on Blu-ray, or first time release on Blu-ray, by Canadian International Pictures, which is this great label that does one restoration a month. And this is the one they're doing for September. And there's a new interview with Jesse Wente, that like this half-hour masterclass in what he calls the alternate canon of Indigenous cinema, which is films that are about Indigenous people and places, but not made by them. And there's Little Big Man, there's Dances with Wolves, obviously, is the one that everybody thinks of. But Jesse's listing these films and placing this film in the canon, and Rolf de Heer's 10 Canoes is in there, and all of these really interesting explorations. And what he's implying is that there is an Indigenous canon finally now happening.
Yes.
Which is the result of people getting the tools and the funding. But I think Angela's Shadow fits right into that, because it's so clearly a personal narrative and a personal story that's hoisted on everybody's shoulders. Like, it's not just you, it's the whole team making this film, the way they made it, and with the collective goodwill to get it done in 13 days. I think I just fumbled through that large setup, but what I'm trying to say.
No, it was great. That makes sense. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we're at a moment, and I saw this when I was programming at TIFF. There's so much stuff coming out, and it's not just straight narratives either. It's not documentary realism. It's not autobiographical stories. It's genre, and it's this mixture of genre language and real world history, and the suggestion, it not just in Angela's Shadow, but in a dozen films that I've seen in the last 2-3 years, the suggestion that we use the language of genre to tackle our past and understand it, because the genre structure provides a beginning, a middle, and an end that the real world just doesn't.
Right.
And maybe it's more relatable to an audience to tell them what you can package as, in air quotes, a ghost story.
Yeah.
But there's also so much other stuff going on. There's a white character in your film who is either possessed by some kind of settler spirit or just driven mad by his own expectations and failures, personal failures in his life. And it's the ambiguity that's the most interesting, right? If you explain it, it stops having power. If we don't understand something, it's much more disturbing.
Yeah. And I mean, everything in that film was intentional. And, I come from a small community in Northern Ontario where the church is very present, and then Angela's Shadow was also inspired by a book I never published called Soul Kept with, my mentor at the time was the late Lee Miracle. So we unpacked that story, and then I approached a friend of mine who's non-native, Steve Neufeld, and I was like, can you co-write this with me? Can you help me bring this to life? And he looked at the manuscript and we figured it out and linked it to Broken Angel. And, definitely a statement about white supremacy and what is happening in Indigenous community and colonization and everything else. And I was always raised with the teaching that if you're going to engage with ceremony, you better believe what you're engaging with, because if you don't, you will be haunted, So there's that. I won't explain away everything in the film, but, he's an important character who, in the third film, Katawasasin, basically haunts the community. So, there's all these links and stuff like that. And residential school. And also, I think the big thing about that story is that I had my mom there. I had my two sons on screen. Like the cousins are my two older boys, Mahigan and Ashavak. And then my other son, Tapwewen, is the little boy running away from residential school. And my mom was the little one beside me who plucked that geese real fast. And I was like, Mom, pretend, please, because we only have. Anyway. But it was just like that whole communal feel. My mom's a survivor, so I had firsthand, access. So I know those stories and I know them well. And I feel like we need to kind of have these conversations. And I'm hoping that Angela's Shadow sparks those kind of, that dialogue, and like you say, you walk away and you're like, what did I just see? What's happening with that character? What's going on? And, there's a lot of protocol, in that story as well, around him engaging with something he doesn't understand. What happens?
Yeah. Well, what you're saying about seeing Flashdance and coming away, it's a weird way to bring it all back around, but I was realizing, I'm hearing you say it all over right now. It's like, it is about making something that will hopefully connect to someone else that you don't even know, that you've never met, in whatever circumstance they're in. And that this film, set in the 1930s in a world that no longer exists, really, for good and bad reasons. Like, that's just, there's progress, but there's also the destruction of tradition that's sort of commented on within the text of the material. It's about something else now, right? Like, it passes from the people who made it to the people who see it. And what's the feedback been like? I mean, you won an award, it's been on the festival circuit, but what has your experience been like at Q&As? Are people connecting to the message the way you want them to?
I believe so. I think people are, for me, I'm an instructor. I work within the universities, and, as an Indigenous person, I always tell my students context. What's the story? What's the story? Like, let's dig a little deeper. Let's delve into why people behave the way they behave. I don't know. I just feel like, as someone who has that lived experience, I think it's necessary to always provide context. And that's why with Broken Angel, it was current, it was present day. And then I'm like, let's go back in time. Let's talk about our resiliency and our strength and the power of Indigenous women who go underground, who keep the culture alive, and why we are where we are today is because of those women and their fearlessness, and I just love women-led stories. I just think, for us, it's so important to see that strength, And that's what I think Angela's Shadow does. And a lot of the feedback is I just get from, well, it's funny because we did one screening, a pre-screening in Whistler, and it was probably 70% Indigenous folks in the audience. And I thought they were going to be like more scared or they laughed. It was like, I'm like, guys, this isn't a comedy. This is not a comedy. And then I had one woman come up to me. She goes, I laughed, I cried, I was angry, I was like happy. Like she went through everything. And for me as a filmmaker, I was like, yes, that's a good thing. But it depends on the audience too, right? Like at VIFF, we had, a standing ovation and people were in tears. So it depends on who your audience is and what they engage with or what they understand or don't understand, if that makes sense. So it's always different. But, we're done the festival, run. And so now I'm looking forward to when it's on Hollywood Suite, like what that kind of engagement's going to be like. And my mom seeing herself on the screen because she's always got Hollywood Suite on. So, and what people in my community are going to say when they're able to access it, like, because I made it for an Indigenous audience first and foremost, right? Everybody else is welcome to come, but that's what I had in mind first. So I'm really curious as to, when it's out there, what people are going to say.
Yeah. Well, and I'll let you go with the same question I always end the podcast with, which is going to be really weird in this one. Is there anything from the film you chose? Like, is there anything from Flashdance that you borrowed or incorporated or pulled or outright lifted for either Angela's Shadow or your other stuff? Have you ever sort of nodded to it?
Just seeing, I know we talked about it before, is that, she's not like a visibly white woman. And for me as a young person, I saw this woman who was like, what's her background? Oh, she doesn't fit that kind of mold and what I'm used to seeing. That was a big deal. And the fact that she came from a place of poverty was a big deal for me, and that she was kind of on her own and she faced her fears. She went for her dreams. And I think these are the kinds of women that allow us, like the next generation, to kind of find our way. Like they paved the path in a way. I know that sounds far with Flashdance, but as a young person going to this film and feeling elated and just feeling so engaged and walking away talking about the film, and I'm still talking about it, and I'm in my 50s, like what the actual hell. I'm not like you, haven't unpacked it completely, but of course, seeing a strong female lead the story that's huge. And I think we need to see more of that, and I'm hoping with my films that, younger Indigenous folks, they see themselves on the screen and yeah, I can do that. She was able to do that. I understand now, or I don't know, it's important as a storyteller, I think, to have, a message.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I can absolutely see a through line in terms of, an inspirational figure at the right moment. The things we take away from movies are, you can never predict what it's going to be, but when it happens, it can literally change the direction of your life.
Maybe I should do a remake of Flashdance, but Indigenous. Hey, there you go. I'm just kidding.
I'm not seeing a downside. I think this could actually, why not? IP is king right now. If you just pitch Paramount the property.
There you go. I will do it. I would love it. But she'd have to be a 50-year-old woman. I'm just kidding. Because I would play the lead. I'm totally kidding.
No, never too early to start the dance training.
Yeah.
Or never too late, I guess.
Never too late. Look at Alanisa Bomswin. What is she, 93 now? 57 films?
Yeah, still spry.
There you go. So, we have to kind of live up to that as Indigenous filmmakers. So nothing's impossible.
My thanks to Jules Koostachin, whose new film Angela's Shadow is now available to stream in Canada on Hollywood Suite. Thanks also to Alia Stationwala. She knows what she did. You can find Jules on Instagram at Jules Koostachin, all one word, and you can find Flashdance on 4K, Blu-ray, and DVD from Paramount Home Entertainment. It's also streaming on Super Channel in Canada and on Canopy and Hoopla in the US, and available to rent or buy on various VOD services across North America. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 41 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, get all the boosters. I'll see you next week.